this is a religious tyranny. It's absolutely it's a medieval regime which belongs to medieval ages.
Hello, welcome to the channel. Yesterday I attended an event in Westminster at which a number of MPs and Lords discussed the situation in Iran currently, in particular the wave of protests which are going on against the regime. A keynote speaker at the event was someone called Mr. Hossein Abedini. I managed to grab him for a quick interview, so I'm going to play that to you now. The audio is not great because I recorded it on my iPhone, but you can still make out most of what's said, and it gets better towards the end. As usual, if you could subscribe to the channel and like the video, that's great because it helps people find it. That's about it in terms of the introduction, so enjoy. So, to begin with, could you just give us a bit of an overview about what your role is and what the organisation set out to do?
Well, I am a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. The NCRI is the parliament in exile of the Iranian resistance.
Yeah.
It has more than 500 members,
Yeah.
Different parties and organizations and individuals who are active inside Iran. And it's a democratic alternative which is seeking a secular, free, democratic Iran.
Yeah.
The NCRI president-elect is Mrs. Maryam Rajavi, who sent a message to parliamentarians today. She has been the guest of many parliaments throughout the world, and she has got a 10-point plan for a free, democratic Iran, looking for absolute equality between men and women, abolition of the death penalty, and Iran free of any nuclear activity and nuclear weapons, and many other, democratic values. So the NCRI is being supported by many parliamentarians and politicians throughout the world. Here in the UK, the majority in the House of Commons and many members of the House of Lords, nearly 200 of them, have supported the NCRI as a legitimate resistance movement and a true alternative to the religious dictatorship in Iran in a number of occasions. And you could see today that there were cross-party MPs and peers from all the major parties, as well as cross-bench members of the House of Lords, who were here to show their support on behalf of many of their colleagues who weren't able to be present. So we discussed a number of very important issues today because there are 4 major concerns about Iran, and all of these concerns were touched upon today. The main concern is, of course, the horrific human rights violations in Iran. Iran, under the rule of the clergy Ayatollahs dictatorship, has, according to Amnesty International, is the biggest executioner per capita in the world. 60% of all the announced executions in the world are happening in Iran, according to Amnesty International, and 90% of all the executions in the Middle East and Islamic world is happening in Iran. And in addition to that, there are very degrading and horrendous punishments like eye gougings and amputations of limbs, stonings, and all these medieval, brutal, barbaric things are happening in Iran in the name of God. So as you can see, this is the most ungodly regime, which is using the name of God and religion to suppress people. This is why the Iranian people have risen up, and in their hundreds of thousands, they are in the streets. Iran protests are very famous. In last November, at least 1,500 people were killed, and another 4,000 people were wounded, 12,000 people were arrested. But the demonstrations are going on. The brave young Iranians and women at the forefront of these demonstrations who are asking for regime change and for democratic change in Iran. So that is priority number 1. The second concern is the terrorism of the regime. The Iranian mullahs have been behind massive number of terrorist activities. I myself was a target of an assassination attempt. I narrowly escaped death. I was very badly wounded, chest. That happened in Turkey when I went there to help some Iranian refugees who had crossed the borders through the mountainous regions, and the Turkish government apparently wanted to send them back. So we were there in coordination with the human rights organizations to help and save the life of those refugees. Thank you very much. Thank you. It was great to see you. Sorry.
Yeah. No worries.
So you can
It's a
edit
busy
it.
life.
So I was talking about the second concern, which is terrorism of the regime, and what happened to myself. I was taken to a hospital, international hospital in Turkey. I went through 14 major surgeries, and I was very lucky to survive because my chance was very, very slim.
Wow.
Because I had been hit in the chest. My liver had been 80% of my liver had gone. Totally smashed. They put my liver in a plastic mesh to keep it together, and I was in a near coma condition for 45 days. Even when I was in hospital, they tried twice to come and finish me off. In the hospital.
So who was this who was trying to? Who was it?
It was the Iranian mullahs, the so-called
the regime.
Iranian diplomats who were terrorists.
Right.
Diplomat terrorists of the regime, because the Iranian regime's embassies are really the nest of spies, espionage on Iranians and terrorist activities.
Right.
So they had sent their people to finish me off, while I was in hospital.
Wow.
But anyhow, I survived, and I have been able to speak on behalf of many of my colleagues who unfortunately have been killed throughout the world by these death squads of the Iranian mullahs. And I've been to the United States, I've spoken in the US Congress, I've taken part in different meetings here in the British Parliament, and spoke on behalf of all of those who unfortunately didn't make it.
Yeah.
They were killed. So that's the second concern. The third concern is the meddling of the Iranian mullahs in the affairs of other Middle East countries, especially in Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and all over the Islamic world. The regime, like an octopus, has stretched, its arms and tentacles to usurp, other countries.
So could you give us just a quick overview of what their objectives are? So why are they interfering in the way they are?
Well,
How do they do that?
This is a religious dictatorship, which is after another Ottoman-like empire. The founder of this theocracy,
Yeah.
Khomeini, said once, when he was still around, that Islam knows no boundaries.
Yeah.
So they continued the war with Iraq for 8 years because they wanted to use Iraq as a jump board, for conquering the other Middle East and Islamic countries. So this regime is an expansionist terrorist regime which has been using, other Arabic and Muslim countries as they call them, the depths of their strategy.
Yeah.
Ali Khamenei once said, the supreme leader of the regime, that if we are defeated, in Syria, then the enemy will overthrow us, in Tehran.
Yeah.
So Syria, Iraq, Yemen is playing, such a role for the regime.
So what do you say, because I know this is going to be quite a short interview, so what do you say to people in the West who are reluctant to speak out about the situation in Iran because they think it might be, offensive? So what's the best way, do you think, for people in the West to
I
go
think
about it?
the big majority of Iranians who have been executed are true Muslims.
Yeah.
And this regime, although it calls itself a Muslim regime,
Yeah.
but it's an imposter regime, and the Ayatollahs, there is a bunch of Ayatollahs, clerics, who are despised by the Iranian people. The big majority of Iranians who have been executed, they are Muslims, they are Shiite,
Yeah.
as well as Sunnis and Christians and Jews and so on and so forth. So this phenomenon of Islamic fundamentalism has to be challenged and fought with from within Iran, inside Iran, and by the Muslim people who themselves have risen up against it. Nobody has got anything against Islam. It's not called Islamophobia.
Yeah.
I'm a Muslim myself, I'm a committed Muslim.
Yeah.
But diametrically I oppose, these brutal religious fundamentalists
Yeah.
who are against God, who are against religion. Every Quranic verse starts with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which means in the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. So is this what the mullahs are representing? They are executing and brutally even executing the children.
So it should be possible to criticize it politically without having to necessarily be criticizing the whole religion necessarily.
Of course.
So have you heard of the White Wednesdays campaign?
I have, yes.
What do you think about that campaign?
Well, I think that campaign is important, but what is more important is the true protest in Iran and the bloody suppression of the Iranians. And those Iranians, brave Iranians, students, workers, and teachers, and from all strata of the Iranian society, who have risen up, and they are being brutally murdered in Iran. Of course, this, I think what's the hijab and forcing women to wear the hijab is absolutely disgusting. And we, as the main Iranian resistance movement, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, have in many occasions have condemned this. And Mrs. Rajavi, who herself is a true Muslim woman, she has said, in the future democratic government of Iran, no religion will have any superiority over other religions, and women will be absolutely free to wear whatever they like. And this is the minimum freedom of the Iranian women. We very much support that. But I think we should support the protests of the Iranian people who want to overthrow this regime and to bring real democratic change to Iran.
Yeah. And so at the moment, how democratic would you say it is in Iran, just for someone who's got no understanding of the region at all?
It has got no semblance,
No
resemblance to any democratic values. It's a religious tyranny. It's absolutely, it's a medieval regime which belongs to medieval ages. Iran is a land of literature, science, and a very ancient country. And Iranian people are very educated people, they are very progressive people who deserve a real democratic government. They don't deserve to have these turban mullahs with such a dark ideology who want to suppress them. And this is why, finally the people of Iran, despite all the horrific suppression, have risen up and they are ready to overthrow the regime.
Well, yeah, I definitely wish them well. One final question. In terms of the killing of the general, which you've just seen recently, so in the West we've had quite a big debate about whether that was the right decision, and a lot of people think it's Western interference, but other people think that it was some form of reaction to what he'd been doing to US and Western forces.
Sure.
So what's your view of that as someone who's opposed the regime? Are you in favour of it or are you against that?
Well, I think nobody mourned Qasem Soleimani's death because he was a brutal mass murderer. If not responsible for millions of deaths, I really believe that, in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, all over the Islamic world, and tens of thousands of executions inside Iran, he was certainly responsible for hundreds of thousands of killings throughout the world. And he was the other coin of Abu Bakr Baghdadi, the Daesh leader, and also Osama bin Laden. So nobody mourned, the death of those. And he was not a general. He was not a part of the Iranian military, the regular army of Iran. He was a commander-in-chief of a terrorist force, which is known as Quds Force, which is 5th Division of the Revolutionary Guards. And this Revolutionary Guard is a paramilitary organization which was created to preserve the regime. And its main role has been brutal repression inside Iran and external terrorism and warmongering, crisis mongering in the region. So Qasem Soleimani's death was celebrated by millions of Iranians, millions of Iraqis, and millions of Syrians. So I think that speaks for itself.
Okay, actually, one more question.
Go ahead.
What do you think about if the regime does eventually get overturned and you manage to implement some form of democratic system in Iran, how will relations with Israel change, do you think? What would be your ideal relationship with Israel and between Israel and Iran?
Well, I think, the National Council of Resistance of Iran was the first party in the whole Middle East which supported the Oslo Pact between Palestinian cause and Israel. So we have always said, we would like to live in coexistence with all our neighbors. I think Iran, which, as I said, has always played a major role in the region for its geostrategic and geopolitical importance, where it's situated and more than 80 million population, has always played a major role in the whole Islamic world. Iran, as it has been in many occasions, can become a center of stability and tranquility in the region, living in coexistence with all its Arab neighbors, with Palestinians and with other countries in the region. Or it, unfortunately, can become like what it is now under the Ayatollahs, an epicenter of terrorism, warmongering, crisis mongering. So by ending this religious dictatorship, I think the whole region will be free.
Amazing.
Thank you very much, my friend.
Thanks so much. Me too. Okay, that's about it from me this week. I hope you enjoyed it. As usual, subscribe and like the video if you liked it, and leave some comments as well. Finally, this also goes out as a podcast. It's called the E2 Review. I'll put a link to the podcast version in the show notes, which basically means you can just listen to the audio of this if that's what you prefer to do. Okay, thanks for watching.